Because if the one thing the Hindus talk about, it's the self.
Yes.
So we never stop
Now
talking
comes the
about
experts.
it. So nor do I ever stop talking. Let me get this. Oh, God, it went away. First of all, thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah.
I really, really do appreciate being here with you in this august company of it's almost like a dream. I'm just so grateful to be here with like-minded people who are on the spiritual path. What a beautiful spring day you've got here. It's all green. It's just, I'm just very grateful, and I thank you for this opportunity. As I said, we never stop talking about the self. The Hindus were kind of obsessed with it, and there's various ways of thinking about it. So when the topic came forth, I was thinking about self, true self, false self, and then I thought of this story that came from the ancient Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. This Upanishad is thousands of years old, very, very ancient text. And in this text, it tells the story of the great old sage Yajnavalkya. I'll say that backwards and you get a prize. So Yajnavalkya was getting up there, and he realized it was getting old and the time had come for him to finally now renounce everything, and he was going to go off into the forest and spend the rest of his days in contemplation. So the rest of his life should be spent in contemplation and meditation, so when the last moment came, he could just merge into the infinite. So he goes to talk to his wife, Maitreya, about it. He says, Maitreya, I've become old. The time has now come for me to renounce everything. I'm now going to give everything up, and I'm going to go into the forest to spend my last days in contemplation. But don't worry, you're going to be cared for. There's property, there's money. Don't worry, everything will be taken care of. And she said, wait a minute, before you go, first of all, I don't care about your wealth or your property. But before you go, you tell me the secret of immortality. And Yajnavalkya said to her, Maitreya, I've always loved you, but now I love you even more, that you should even ask this at this time in our life. And so he gave there was this famous dialogue and discussion, the teaching of Yajnavalkya on the self, in which he said, it is not for the sake of the husband, my beloved, that the husband is loved, but for the sake of the self. It is not for the sake of the wife, my beloved, that the wife is loved, but for the sake of the self. It is not for the sake of the children, my beloved, that the children are beloved, but for the sake of the self. And then Yajnavalkya goes to this entire laundry list of things that we as human beings love and cherish. And he says, none of these things do we love in and of themselves. We love them only for the sake of the self, which is quite interesting because he said, after all this, so, what does that have to do with the self, we would think? And he said, the self is to be known, hear about it, reflect on it, meditate on it. And that's what he's going to do. He's packing up and he's walking out to hearing, reflecting, meditating upon it. So what's this self then that Yajnavalkya is talking about? Well, he says the self, as he's telling his wife Maitreya, is eternal, pure consciousness, infinite, and transcendent. That is the self. When most of us think of self, we're not thinking infinite and transcendent. We're just not. That's not our association with self, right? We think of the body, or we think of the mind, or some personality, or some combination thereof. But we don't think infinite and transcendent. We don't think eternal. But that is indeed who and what the self really is. Our true self is infinite, transcendent, ever pure. And that is who we really are. The true self, or what we call Atman in Sanskrit, is birthless, deathless, unchanging forever. was never born, it can never die. It's unaffected by the moods of our mind or by all the failings of our body. Most importantly, our true self was absolutely one with this infinite divine reality, which in Sanskrit is called Brahman. Brahman is that infinite divine reality, the infinite divinity that pervades everything. It is the existence through which everything exists. It is consciousness itself. It is the very nature of joy itself. It is love. And the Atman, our divine self within, is absolutely one with that. It's not a reflection of it. It's not a slice of it. It's not a tidbit of it. It's not a little grain. It's the whole shebang. Our true nature is the whole shebang, that infinite divine reality, birthless, deathless, eternal, pure, perfect. When we say this divine reality is transcendent, that everything that pervades this universe, in that sense, we call it Brahman. When we think of this being as within us in an interior sort of way, we call it Atman. The terminology doesn't really matter. What really matters is the obvious fact is there can't be two infinites. It's not possible. There can be only one infinite. Therefore, there's only one infinite divine reality, and that infinite divine reality is at the core of our being, and the core of your being, and the core of all beings. There is only one infinite divine reality, which is the nature of pure transcendent consciousness, infinite joy, infinite love, infinite existence, existence itself. And that is who and what the true self really is. When we love, which is what Yagyavvalkya is talking about, we're really responding to the divinity in the other person. We're asserting our unity with that other person. When we really, really love someone very much, we don't want there to be any separation at all. We want to be absolutely one with them. We want no sense of separation. Well, we do that with the people that we're terribly in love with. But this is actually, we're responding to the truth of our own existence, because there is no separation, there is no other. There is no other. There's only one infinite divine reality. The problem is that when we love, we do it unconsciously. And the Hindu tradition says, do it consciously. When we love, when we engage in acts of kindness, of generosity, of compassion, we are responding to the divinity in others. We are affirming our oneness with other beings. We're saying, you and I are the same. When we hate, when we're greedy, when we're self-centered, or just plain mean, that is when we not only deny the divinity of the other person, we actually deny our own divinity. That isn't who we are. When we hate, what we're doing is say, you over there, you're different than me. You're gay, you're Muslim, you're Hindu, you're black, you're brown, you're different, you're poor, you're Republican. It all counts, baby. It all counts. We all hold them in our hearts because our hearts are infinite and boundless. Infinite. When we respond to that, that is when the true self shines through. The false self takes over when we say, no, there's a separation. You're that, you're this, and I'm that. You're that way, I'm this way. That's how wars are fought. That's how fights start. That's how we end up in violence. When we say, I'm this way, you're another way, I have nothing to do with your kind of people. Every genocide was started with just that kind of idea. What the false self really does is limit our identity. And we can put a shorthand on it and just say ego. But it's actually much more tricky than that. It limits our identity. Because our real nature is so noble and so exalted. Our nature is vast. And what the false self does is limit who we are. It tries to make us small. It tries to say, no, you're not infinite, you're not vast, you're not part of that person. You're not infinite, you're weak, you're mortal. You are subject to birth and to death and to age. You are subject to fat and to the whims of our own minds, the failings of our own body, and the ups and downs of our boyfriends or girlfriends' moods, the whims of our jobs, and the whims of our bosses, and the whims of traffic. Because we convince ourselves that we are small, and we are helpless, and we are mortal, and we are weak. And that terrible limiting of our true identity is what the false self does. Now, because it's the job of the false self to limit our identity, we end up with this always kind of low-level existential pain. Because it really hurts to be kind of forced into a tiny little box without air. So we begin to feel like there's something wrong. We begin to feel like there's this big hole inside of our heart, that there's something missing. There's something that we have to put into this hole. So we try to fill it up. There's something lacking. So we fill it up with money or power or sex or drugs or alcohol or Botox or whatever, food, chocolate, that's mine. Whatever we think will make us happy. Whatever we think is going to fill up that big hole. But the problem is, because this emptiness and hunger comes from the false self, you can never fill that sucker up. You can't feed a phantom. You can't feed a ghost. And the true self is always full. It's the nature of joy itself. It has no needs, no wants. It does nothing but exist in joy and completion. In Sanskrit, we call it purna, full. It's the nature of absolute joy and the fullness of joy. And that is who we really are. So eventually, the good news is that the true self doesn't need feeding. And the other thing is that holding on to the false self doesn't really work, because you can't live a lie your whole life. If we spend our life being unhappy and looking for happiness and joy in all the wrong places, and we die that way, well, we'll come around again and try it all over again, until we learn that what gives us joy and freedom and peace is not feeding this phantom that doesn't exist. It's living in the joy and the fulfillment and completion of our own true nature, which is the same nature as every being in front of us. That when we love and we serve all these manifestations of the divine in front of us, that we are living in the freedom of the true self. And inevitably, one day, we will all get there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And again, to our other speakers, reflections or thoughts on some of that. What came to mind?
When you come to complete experience of the true self, then at that level, how is compassion manifesting, or what happens at that point? How do you express that kind of state?
Just your very existence you will be exuding such love and kindness. Think of His Holiness Dalai Lama. Mm-hmm. He doesn't actually have to do too much of anything, except when you're with him, you feel such incredible joy, because he's sort of become that. Mm-hmm. In that same way that people in that state naturally feel acutely for other people's sorrow. They naturally do everything they can to do anything they can to remove the sufferings of others, because they don't feel the separation that you're one person and I'm another, and bad karma, baby, better luck next life. They're incapable of thinking that way because they don't have that harsh separation.
Mhm.
He's the most joyful person I've encountered in a long time.
Yeah. But someone from your tradition.
Yes. Oh, I've met many, and they're totally. You would totally not know their names, but when you go in their presence, you feel bathed in love. You feel absolutely bathed in love. Oh, there was one old sadhu that I met in Vrindavan, and when I came there, I just felt like I'd never been so happy in my whole life, just sitting in his presence. And he was very weak, so he had someone bring me an apple, and he said, "Be happy." And I just started, he told me to be happy. Oh, God, I'll never get this apple away. It's like, because it was just a reflection of this. He just exuded love in such a tangible way that I felt like I felt just bathed in love and purity, absolute purity. Like it was somehow that I was in this beautiful light that was never glaring. There was just, he could see everything in my mind, and there was no exception about, oh, you're thinking of that, huh? Nothing. Just everything was an embrace. And when you reach that state, I mean, he's just one of a number that I could mention, that it's like, yes, these people, you will never know them. They will live and die in obscurity, and they're very happy that way. But their vibration, their love, goes into the universe, and it lightens the load for the rest of us.
Brother Paul, did any...
I'm speechless.
Oh, come on.
That would be sacred silence, you know. What do you do when you're in the presence of somebody like that or something like that? It really doesn't demand anything of you.
No.
It just, you know, be with that being. And I think that's what the old practice of silence in monastic tradition is. The whole community, in a sense, lives in that silence because not much needs to be said, really. I mean, the problem is we're such a wordy religion as Christians, whereas there's something interior that is, you know, Emily Dickinson has this line that's many gestures from the pulpit, mighty hallelujahs roll. Narcotics cannot still the tooth that nibbles at the soul. And that is, to me, suggests doubt as much as faith, you know. But the fact is, there's something in you that really that speaks of the truth over and above everything that you might be saying about it. And so that's that little nibble at the soul, and it's a very small thing. You know, faith is a very small thing. It starts out as a mustard seed. We kind of squash it with words. You know, we can actually smother it under you know, like even what we're doing here. You know, we're in dire danger, the four of us here, of smothering the reality in words. So please, you know, forgive us, but you get my point.
Yeah.